and Zayin Cheshvan Sameach. Wasn't it exciting last night? Literally in the we said and literally within the hour, and the water started coming. So on one hand, I had prepared another theme of Geshem, because there's so much to speak about when it comes to rain. Obviously, both in Tanakh and in the Gemara and in various stories of Chazal. However, as we just finished Parshat Noach, I couldn't help myself, but instead elaborating on a theme in Parshat Noach, wherein on one hand, we know that we have many different personalities in every generation who are more of a Noach type. And by that I mean, yes, the ones who are natural tzaddikim, but don't necessarily either have to work on their tzidkut. And as Rashi explains, the two opinions, Noach is tzaddik, tamim haya b'dorotav, that he was a tzaddik in his generation, but not necessarily in the generation of Abraham, or that he would have been a tzaddik even in the generation of Abraham. So there's a lot to speak about also with regard to subjectivity of certain personalities in each one of their generations. I decided not to speak about that either, rather to speak about I'm going to say more neglected portion in this week's Parsha, and that is the aftermath of the Mabul, the aftermath of the flood. If you remember, Noach, who was first portrayed as an Ish Elokim, Noach is Sadiq, et Elokim hitalech Noach, in the end becomes an Ish Adama, becomes a man, and very much entrenched within the earth, maybe psychologically. And he needed to become a man more attached to the land after the detachment issue through the Mabul. But whatever the case may be, as he comes out and he plants a kerem, a vineyard, we hear that he becomes inebriated through drinking. And then we hear strange psukim of his son Ham, whom it says the following. So what I'm going to do is actually, I'm going to share with you a wonderful article, very comprehensive, that was written. We're going to translate as we go along to try to understand what it was that Ham did. So without further ado, I'm going to share the first screen. And then hopefully as well, here, one moment. Yes. Okay. I shared this screen. This is one of the screens, but not the other one. Okay, one moment. Sorry, first. I'm going to place actually, okay. First I'm going to send this to you as a chat so that everyone has the Gemara part. One moment. What did I call it? Okay. Just a minute. This is a PDF before we continue. Okay, so we're going to, as you see, discuss the notion of kibbud avim from all different perspectives, and now you'll see how Chazal relate to this as well. Okay. Now that this is transferred, I'm uploading. Getting one part of this. Okay, so now you have one of the documents. Now my challenge is to try to find the other documents, which I don't see right now. Okay, maybe if I share the screen. Okay, let me try it this way. Yes, okay. And here's the other document. So we're going to get started with understanding what was the sin of Ham ben Noach. So once again, we're going to look at the psukim, so if you can follow along together with me. Vayachal Noach ish ha'adama vayita kerem. Here already the Torah is evaluating Noach to a certain degree, both through the word vayachel, which Rashi has already interpreted as the terminology of chilul. He desecrated, and one can say he desecrated his status of walking with God. He's now very much an earthly person. hayita kerem. And he doesn't even plant a tomato patch, rather a vineyard, which automatically gives us a sense not of the necessities of life, but rather the luxuries or the pleasures. But we're not going to focus on Noach and his vineyard, and even Noach and becoming drunk, rather the continuation. Vayitgal b'toch ahlo. And Noach exposed himself, he was exposed in his tent. Then comes the main component of our story. Vayar Cham abi Canaan et ervat aviv. And Cham, the father of Canaan, saw his father's nakedness. Vayaged l'shnei achav b'chutz. And then it's not enough that he saw it. He went and he told of the nakedness to his two brothers. But what did Shem and Yafet do? They took the simla, they took a garment and they put it on their shoulders and they walked backwards and they covered their father's nakedness while their heads were facing backwards so that they would not see their father's nakedness. Now the continuation of the story. Vayikatz Noach miyino, vayidat asher asa lo b'no hakatan. Noach woke up from his intoxication and he knew what his young son had done. Vayomer arur Canaan eved avadim yalechav, and he curses his grandson Canaan, and he blesses Baruch Hashem Elokei Shem v'Canaan eved lamo, blesses Shem, again curses Canaan that he should be an eved to Shem, Yavta Elokim liyafet v'yishkon b'olei Shem, and praises Yafet that he should be in the house of Shem, v'Canaan eved lamo, and that Canaan will also be an eved to Yafet. Now, we just look at the basic shot, it seems that Noach lost consciousness, and while his nakedness was revealed, and Cham saw his father naked and told his brothers, and this obviously is very embarrassing, very embarrassing for the father, for the sons to see their father naked without clothing. So Shem and Yafet covered their father while he was naked without looking at his nakedness, and yet we're a little bothered. Right? Why does this not seem to be even the pshat? Number one, why should Noach curse Canaan, who is Cham's son, and not Cham himself? If Cham was the one who was so excited about seeing his father's nakedness, and just like the Midrash says, Cham chotei u'Canaan mitkalel. Ask the Midrash and Bereshit Rabbah, why should Cham be the one to sin, and the poor son be the one who's cursed? In addition, what did this pasuk mean? Noach woke up and he knew what his younger son had done to him. What does it mean? Again, what he had done to him. And what did Cham do to Noach? And how could, if it was just seeing his nakedness, how would Noach have known this? And why use the terminology, what was done to him? If he just saw his nakedness, then nothing was done to him. And perhaps the greatest question is, what was so bad that Noach cursed Canaan in such a harsh way, right? 3 times over, as we saw. So what we're going to begin with is the terminology, or basically answers that are given by a Chazal and classical medieval Parshanim. Let's begin with, and we'll even start with a Chazal here quoted by the Ramban, who says, "V'hinei hafit, shera'acham ervat aviv, v'lo nahag bo chavod, shaya ra'oi lo lechasot ervato ulachasot klono, shelo yagideno le'achav." So the Ramban employs the classic approach that we just said, that Cham, instead of covering his father right away, not only did he not cover him, but he went and he told his brothers, and he didn't just tell his 2 brothers, he told his 2 brothers in public, which was mockery for his father. And that's why, as Onkelos says, he told them, he went outside. And Onkelos says, bishvaka, in the shuk, in the marketplace. Can you imagine? Cham basically put on, Facebook, I saw my father, without clothing. And this definitely was very embarrassing. In which case, how could Noach know about this? You can imagine Noach woke up and he went to the marketplace and everyone's like muttering under their breath and mocking him. And therefore, again, the Ramban is very consistent with Noach, with Cham basically showing disrespect to Noach. However, it still doesn't fully answer, why would Noach then curse Canaan and not Cham? What does Canaan have to do with the story? So we look now at a Midrash, which explains as follows. Cham chote uknan mitkalel itma. And Chazal were bothered by this. Why should Canaan be the one who's cursed? Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nechemia both asked this, and Rabbi Yehuda gives the following answer. Lefi shekatuv vayivarech Elokim et Noach ve'et banav ve'en klala b'mkom bracha lefichach vayomer arur Canaan. Rabbi Yehuda answers, well, we see that whenever God gives a bracha, the bracha isn't just for the actual recipient. The greatest bracha is through the children, right? As a matter of fact, we know from ourselves, what's the greatest blessing one can give us? May you have nachas from your children. May your children grow up to be shomrei Torah mitzvot. And so sure enough, when he curses Ham, the most powerful curse is actually to curse his son Canaan. That's Rabbi Yehuda's answer. Rabbi Nechemia gives a different answer. No, it says that and Ham went in and came out. No. Says Rabbi Nechemia, it must be if Noach cursed Canaan, then Canaan was the one who saw, and Canaan was the one who said this to all the brothers. And basically, his father is mentioned here to also bear some level of responsibility, but basically, and Canaan is the sinner. And sure enough, Rashi and Abarbanel bring this Perush as well, whereas the Radak brings explanation of Rabbi Yehuda that no, Ham is going to be cursed through Canaan. So let's first take a look at Rabbi Nechemia's opinion. Rabbi Nechemia said, maybe there really is a difference between what Ham did and what Canaan did. And it must be, if Canaan is cursed, then really Canaan did something wrong. Sure enough, Rav Yosef Bechor Shor says this as well. He says, Vayidgal betoch alo. Now what happened? Shachirim galu oto. Noach was drunk, and it says, and he became exposed in his tent. And there are two ways that one can become exposed. Either Noach took off his own clothes, or Rabbi Yosef Bechor says, no, someone took off his clothes. And it doesn't say who, but you can see from the curse that it must have been Canaan. And then what happened? Canaan was the one who undressed his grandfather in mockery. And Ham saw this. He saw what his son was doing. And instead of covering his father and respecting his father, he went out and basically he told Shem and Yafet, oh my, you know what my son Canaan just did? Oh, he went to dad and he undressed him and dad looked so funny. And sure enough, and they're both cursed then. So notice that what Rav Yosef Bechor Shor is doing is not only explaining according to Rabbi Nechemia that Canaan was really the one to do something wrong, but that Ham was also part of this, and Canaan was able to do this because Noach was in a state of inebriation. Ibn Ezra also says that Canaan must have done something wrong if he's going to be the one who's cursed, and he says, wait a second, it must have been something active that Noach would be conscious of, because it says Vayikatz Noach Vayeda et ma na'asa. He knows that something was done. So Ibn Ezra says, Hakatuv lo gila ma na'asa v'ha'osehu Canaan. The Torah doesn't tell us exactly what was done, but we can figure out, like Rabbi Nechemia says, that the person who perpetrated whatever evil was done was Canaan because he was cursed. So Ibn Ezra fills in and says, V'chein haya ki cham ra'av lo chisel kasher asu achiv rak gel la hadavar v'shama Canaan v'lo nida ma'asa. And so, sure enough, Ibn Ezra changes it a little bit by saying that the person who did this was Canaan. Ham saw and didn't cover, and like Shem and Yafet did, Raki lahadavar v'shama Canaan. And sure enough, Ham is the one who basically publicized what Canaan did. And one can argue that when it says that Noach knew what the younger son had done, maybe it doesn't mean Ham being the younger son, but actually Canaan. And then Ibn Ezra ends by saying, "V'omrim shekila Noach had ben beno b'avor sheberech Elokim b'panav ze derech drash." He quotes Rabbi Yehuda's opinion as a midrashic opinion. Also, the Ralbag says, of course, the curse has to fit the crime. So if Canaan is the one who's cursed 3 times, it must be that he's the criminal. And sure enough, he says, it must be that Canaan was the one who revealed his father's nakedness. And then he makes it even worse. He says, Ham went in and didn't just publicized. But Ham also, he went in, instead of covering his father, Ham, the father of Canaan, went to see what Canaan had done, to see his father's nakedness, and he wasn't embarrassed, meaning, and he didn't cover him up, but instead mocked him even more. And sure enough, when Noach woke up, explains the Ralbag, that's when Noach knew b'nevuah, in prophecy, what Ham's younger son had done, meaning Canaan. And even though the Torah doesn't tell us exactly what the ma'aseh was, and nonetheless, you know that it must have been something terrible, so that Noach was justified in the cursing. And that's the whole point, that he's going to become an Eved. And Noach basically said, you're going to become an Eved. Shekvar higia lo b'nevuah. Shekna'an hu mikulal bazot haklala hanifla'a. He already knew that somewhere along the line, Canaan would end up as an Eved, as a servant. And sure enough, he wanted to show how he cursed him, knowing that this was going to be his ultimate fate. What's still missing from all this? And I hope that then you're all even more curious than you were beforehand. We're still wondering, really. And I get it, that it's definitely, right, mocking of a father to see a parent undressed. But really, what ma'aseh could have been so bad, and in order to justify such a harsh curse, a curse that, as Ibn Ezra says, Noah, the Ralbag says, sorry, that Noach knew about in the future, that he saw that the descendants of Canaan would all be slaves. So Ibn Ezra doesn't necessarily say exactly what was so bad. He says it must be, that Canaan did something really bad. The Ralbag quotes Chazal, and now we're going to see this, based on the Gemara in Sanhedrin, Daf Ayin Amud Aleph, which tells us that there was an actual act. It wasn't just either seeing Noach undressed, nor was it undressing him, but actually it was castration. The sin was castration. The Gemara uses, again, at the basis of the words of the pasuk, Vayikatz Noach mi'ino be'edat asher asalo b'no hakatan. B'no hakatan, again, either we said Ham or Canaan, did something to him. Rabbi Shmuel debate what was done. Chad Amar Sirso, one says he was castrated, Chad Amar Riv'o. And the other one says that he had relations with him. He slept with him, right? Meaning homosexuality. Manda Amar Sirso, the one who says he castrated Noach. Why would he castrate Noach? Mitoch shekol b'revi'i, lalo b'revi'i. We'll explain this more. And again, now we understand why he was cursed. But how about sleeping? Naltalia behedya ha vahad havai. Let's try to understand this a little more. According to Rabbi Shmuel, it must be that whatever it is that Canaan or Ham did, it was evident to Noach right away, because it says that he woke up and he knew what was done. And it seems that it's something, it says, Vayida et asher asa, it must be that it's something she'efshar leroto, that you can overtly see. And that would explain also why Canaan is cursed. So here's the term, Ham mana me'aviv ben Revi. Now we understand this term. Now what happens? By castrating, if you say that it was castration, that Ham castrated his father, and we'll see the reason why Chazal think that it's castration. So we already saw reason number one, because it's something that's evident. You could see, oh my, I've been castrated. And once, again, he says, Ham prevented me from having a fourth son. And that's why Noach curses the fourth and youngest son of Ham, who's Canaan. Just like you prevented me from having a fourth son, so too, I'm going to curse your fourth son. And this, in fact, is the Medrash expounding upon what Rabbi Shmuel said. Amar Abarachia, Harbinitz ta'er Noach b'teva shelo hayalo ben katan l'shem sho. Noach realized when he was in the teva that he was doing most of the work, and that Shem, Ham, and Yafet were already older and taking care of their families. Amar l'kshe etzei amid ben katan yisham sheni. And that's what led him to say when he was in the teva, when I get out of this teva, I'm going to ask my son, I'm going to have another son who will help me out in my old age. And Ham castrated him and prevented him from having a fourth son. Amar, achat manatoti melamid ben katan, ata manatoti melamid ben katan sheyishamsheni, lefiach yeh oto ha'ish eved la'achav. You prevented me from having a younger child who could actually help me out and serve me. So now, because of that, your youngest son isn't going to serve you. He's going to become an eved to Shem and Yafet. Wow, mida keneged mida. Rav Huna says in the name of Rav Yosef, Atamanata milamid ben Revi, lefiach ani marer ben Revi shelcha. Says it doesn't make a difference. It wasn't just about servitude. He says, you prevented me from having a fourth child. It's as if I'm taking your fourth child away from you. So what's interesting is that this seems to have been, and this is how I learned it when I was in, I think, 3rd, 4th grade, that this seems to be the most dominant amongst the Parshanim, so much so that it becomes incorporated. And we see this in Targum Yonatan, right? Pseudo Jonathan, which is around the same time as the Midrashim. That's exactly how the Targum Yonatan explains, Iter Noach min chumraya, v'yadad ishtaut chamayat, da'avid lecham berei, da'avid kala b'schuta degaram le'dolo yolid ben Revi. And he saw that Cham had prevented him from having a fourth son. And Rashi brings this as well. And that's why we all learn this in Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. We hear that maybe it was actually Canaan who was the one who castrated. And this seems to be the Perush we saw. Ibn Ezra and Ralbag didn't say what Canaan did, but they both said that Canaan is the one who did something terrible, if you remember. And apparently, if it was castration, then it's Canaan who castrated his grandfather. So what's interesting is that even if it's not Canaan, but Ham, we understand why Canaan would be cursed, because he's the fourth child. So the Sforno, for example, adds, and he says, Vayar Ham abi Canaan et ervat aviv, ra'a b'ziyun shasalo Canaan b'no. Sforno incorporates both and says they were both guilty. Why? Canaan had made a mockery of his own grandfather. Canaan castrated Noah, v'hu hasirus k'divrei k'tzatam zechrono lebracha, as he's quoting from Chazal, v'kata brusi hakaldi shesersu al yedei kishuv, that it wasn't Ham then saw what Canaan had done. That Canaan had castrated, but how did he castrate? He castrated through some type of magical formula. And Ham saw his son doing this, and he didn't protest. And ervat davar yomar al davar meguneh. He saw his son, not just the result that was terrible, the means through which he did it. He did some type of, again, of magical act. And here, what the Sforno is adding is that you can understand that castration. Wow, Canaan just castrated and Noach didn't wake up from this. Rather, he did some type of, I don't know, black magic formula, and Ham saw this going on and did not rebuke his son. However, this idea of castration, as we said, is based on the fact that it must have been something that was actually seen, something that Noach could know about, and thereby also, we said, it fits into why he would curse the next generation. Well, if he was castrated, it makes sense that he would curse the next generation, even though we don't find the pshat really telling us anything about castration, which is what leads us to the second opinion, that maybe it wasn't just about, according to the Gemara, it seems that Rav and Shmuel agree that there is some level of castration, but one of them adds that there was also sleeping. Then Oman Damar Riv'o, why add that? Okay, he also slept with him. Gamar Vayar Vayarak Tipacha Vayar Chama Biknan et ervat aviv. And we also see this by Vayar Ota Shechem ben Hamor, that the same term of Vayar sometimes is used with regard to promiscuity, like Shechem saw Dinah and then raped her. And therefore, Chazal say, oh, sometimes the word seeing is linked to raping. So it must be that seeing here then has some type of rape connotation. And the Malbim even says, Sheravu mefaresh kamo bra'u et ervata, hinoi lebi'ilah. It's even another way of saying relations, right? It's another way of saying he saw the erva. We know this also in Vayikra. He actually had relations. So again, on one hand, this seems to be very, very midrashic. On the other hand, we know that the term l'rot erva really does mean in Sefer Vayikra not to have relations. And therefore, we understand this idea of having, we'll call it even sodomy right over here, that according to opinion number 2, there was sodomy going on. So why, and why curse Canaan so much? Now we understand this a little more, because we know that when it comes to the Mabul, Chazal also teach us, look at the story of Stone. By Stone was punished with ish and gafrit, with fire. And there was only one tzaddik, and Hashem saved him, meaning Lot. And after that story, do you remember what happened? Lot got drunk, and then his daughters had relations with him. Remember that? So Chazal basically are learning from the Lot story. Oh my gosh, that's such a parallel. It must be that his son had relations with him, right? That here we see sodomy, and this is also very much corroborated by even the door of the Mabul, that the door of the Mabul, they say there was Hamas, and Chazal learn as well that there was homosexuality and sodomy going on. And here then we understand that after the Mabul, you'd think that that would stop, but no, Ham had relations with his father, basically raped his father. But Ketzad Yada Noach Ma'asa Lo Beno. How did Noach know this? And then once again, why would he curse Canaan if Ham was the one to do this? So, and now we're going to understand one last possibility. One can argue that Ham was the one to do this, or as Ibn Ezra said, maybe Canaan was the one who raped his father. And basically we're going back to sodomy. And Noach knows this, and that's the only difficulty. How does Noach know this? But why does he curse Canaan? Because, and instead of leading to a child, this is something that doesn't lead to a child. I'm going to summarize, though, again, the last of the Perushim, which seems to actually be very much established through Pshat as well, and through different stories. And notice the term that's used, Rav Huna says in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, when Noah came out of the Teva, Hachishu Ari b'Shivro, uva l'shamish mitato, v'nitparzer zaro v'nitpazeh. And so very interesting that Chazal attribute a lot of promiscuity to what's going on during the time of the Teva. For example, and it says that when Noah came out of the Teva, a lion came and basically came, Hekisho Ari b'Shivro, came and hurt Noach. Why? And Chazal explained, because he suspected that Noach wanted to come to his wife. And I'm just giving you just a few examples of how Chazal understands the terrible level of promiscuity going on before the Mabul. And as you know, also the Orev didn't want to leave the Teva. Explained Chazal why. He was afraid that Noach would come upon his wife. And oh my, look at all this. So it seems that really what's going on is that after the Mabul, what did Hashem say to Noach? Come out and have more children. Start society and civilization anew. Have more children. And Chazal say that Noach is punished because he doesn't want to bring more children into this world. He didn't want to bring more children. And what shows you that he is really instead just stuck in a rut of passivity, he gets drunk, right? Instead of going to his wife and having more children, he gets drunk. And not only does he get drunk, but he gets undressed by Yigal. But that's exactly the word, Gilui Arayot. It's not that Ham has relations with Noach. Rather, what does it mean? Vara'a et ervato, he saw his erva. And when we see both with regard to Reuven, and Reuven moving, right? It says that Reuven slept with Bilhah. Right? What is this idea? And an early Midrash actually says that Bilhah got drunk and she was exposed naked. And then Reuven came, saw her erva and slept with her. And Yaakov found out and cursed his son Reuven for basically, and that's seen as an act of rebellion against the father. And not only that, but throughout Sefer Vayikra, Yat Erva means sleeping with and you are not allowed to see your father's nakedness. Who's your father's nakedness? His wife. Now we understand. Ham saw that his mother was completely forgotten, that Noach wasn't having relations with his wife. So what did Ham do? Ham saw his father's nakedness. Ham slept with his father's nakedness. Ham slept with his mother. And then Noach woke up. He didn't know immediately what happens, but a few months later, he sees his wife is pregnant. And what does Noach know? He hasn't slept with his wife. He's separated from his wife. And not only that, the child then comes. He's named Canaan. And now this is fascinating. Why don't we know then who's really cursed? Why does it keep saying Canaan ben Ham? And the whole idea is that this child is basically both Ham's son, and if you think about it, Mrs. Noach's son and Noach's grandson, right, from this illicit relations. And this is the worst form of zilzul in a father, right, to sleep with his wife. And therefore, now we understand, Noach figured out that Ham fathered this child from his wife. He doesn't curse Ham. Who does he curse? The illegitimate child. And here we see that that's exactly what the Torah is teaching us. The Torah is teaching us that something like kibbud avim, is not only I would say a Jewish value, which is why, as you know, again, you're going to hear about you're going to hear about it in the Aseret HaDibrot. But wait a second, that's part of our covenant with God. What the Torah is teaching us, as we understand through this Perush, is that when we talk about the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, we hear about this story, and we're told, you know what? Kibbud avim is also basic to humanity. This is a basic aspect of morality, which is why a later Midrash tells us that even before Ma'amad Har Sinai, when Am Yisrael were in Marah, they were told about kibbud avim, specifically for this purpose, before the Torah was given, in order to teach us about the universal aspect of kibbud avim. And now we're going to see how kibbud avim, expressed in a negative way through Noach, or through, I would say, Noach's son Ham, is going to be understood by Chazal in a beautiful, I'm going to say, even somewhat similar context, taking it to another degree. In other words, in order for Chazal to perpetuate this idea of kibbud avim being something universal and not something just as a Jewish concept, we're going to have to see it in Chazal. Chazal, instead of just talking about the extraordinary kibbud avim displayed by Rabbi Tarfon, for example, right, who held his hands under his mother's feet so that she can walk from the bed outside, we're going to hear Chazal talk about kibbud avim through the eyes of non-Jews. And I believe that this is based on the story of Noach and Ham. In order for them to show us, okay, what should be done? Everyone should know about properly respecting parents. And how is the respect to parents going to be expressed? We're going to look, these are the makorot that you have in front of you right now. We're going to look in the Gemara and we're going to see that it's also in the context of sleeping. You may think that specifically, everyone would probably figure out on their own that when a parent asks for something, of course, you're going to help them out. That's very moral. Parent asks for a drink, you'll give them a drink. The question is, go back to the Noach story. Something happened to him when he was sleeping, when he was passive. And what Chazal are going to go out of their way to teach us is that even when our parents are in a passive state, even when they're sleeping, we still have a basic, universal, moral sense and basically commandment and imperative to respect them. Let's take a look, and I'm sure you're all familiar with the story. Nonetheless, we're going to learn it now together based on the Gemara. So let's take a look right now. Here we go. The Gemara in Kiddushin tells us, and there are different versions of the story, and Uri Orbach Anna has made a whole sefer out of these stories for children, and based on Kalasu Chachamenu, but the actual source is in Masechet Kiddushin, talking about relationships between parents and children. Shalu lo l'Rav Ula. Here's the question. Ad hechan kibbud avim. To what degree does one have to respect one's mother? In other words, what are the limitations of kibbud avim? So Chazal, as you know, and gave up various expressions of this. You have to machilo, mashto, and yet when it comes to Rav Ula says, you know what? I don't want you to think about this as just a Jewish concept. I want you to think about this as a universal concept. Go back to the story of Noah, and you see that Noah cursed his son/grandson for basic and some level of promiscuity and disrespect while his father was sleeping. So I want to show you that it's not just in the Noah story, but even today, in my day, in Talmudic times, I want to show you how significant and how basic this concept of kibbud avim is across the board and beyond even the Jewish people. He says, go to like another Noah type person. Go to this Nachri in Ashkelon, and his name is Dama ben Netina. Wow, that's beautiful. Dama. What do you hear in Dama? On one hand, you hear Dam. He's Dam ben Netina. That his father is Netina. That's his name, Netina. But I would say that's not like, you know, a Goyish name. That's a nice Jewish name, Netina, giving us a sense that his father is a very giving person. And he's Dama. Either he's Domeh, he's very similar to his father. He's of the same blood, literally Dama. Or maybe also Dama, from what Chazal's terminology of damim, which is money. He's money ben Netina, right? Maybe he's not literally, maybe what Chazal are telling us is not just he's the son of Netina, but he is a damim ben Netina. He actually himself is a giver. He gives money. Okay, whatever the case is, the family is a very generous family. Ham achat b'kshu chachamim pragmatia. B'shishim ribo sachar. So sure enough, Chazal once went all the way over to him and did business dealings with him. They wanted pragmatia, which is the Hebrew term or English term today of pragmatics. It actually comes from the Greek. And they wanted to be involved in a business dealing of shishim ribo. We're talking about 600,000. Wow, that's like a good business deal. And they wanted, basically, Dama ben Netina could have earned 600,000. Little problem, though. But the key to the safe of the Shishim Ribo, basically the key to the safe was under his father's head, and Dama ben Netina did not want to disturb his father. Right away, I hope you're all seeing the parallels. Chazal are teaching us it's a universal value. And it's like father, like son over here. And notice the father is sleeping. What does the son do? He doesn't wake him up. He doesn't castrate him. He doesn't embarrass him. Rather, he leaves him alone. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Shaluat Rabbi Eliezer. So that's Ula's answer. Now, you want to know, even if it means losing $600,000, let's say, against Sachar, that's what it is. They asked Rabbi Eliezer, Ad Heichan kibbud avim. Really? Amar lahem, they keep on using as an example a Nachri, a non-Jew, telling us, yeah, it basically goes back. We're not even talking about the Jewish value. It goes back to Noah. It goes back to universal people. Dama ben Netina shmo, pamachat. Bikshu mimeno chachamim avanim le'efod b'shishim ribo sachar. Notice that Shmuel adds a little detail. It wasn't just that they wanted a business dealing. They wanted to purchase stones for the ephod. Remember the choshen ha'ephod that the Kohen Gadol would wear? And that's how Dama ben Netina would have earned 600,000 sachar. But the key to the stones was under his father's head, and he didn't want to wake him up. So notice that he goes even further and says, it wasn't just a business dealing. He could have had stones on the Choshen. He could have had all the, not just fortune, but fame. And he gave that up as well. So Shmuel is just coming to not just corroborate, but even aggravate the challenge of kibbud avim. It means giving up on fortune, and it means giving up on fame. But what else does he add? But we know Now, when it comes to kibbud avayim, just like you see in the Noach story, that there's terrible punishment generation after generation, and there's punishment, even though it seems based on pshat that Cham was the one who did something wrong, and his son is punished. When you do something right, take a look. Hashem rewards. Shenodalo para aduma be'edro. Anyone tell me, why is a para aduma even greater? So firstly, nodalo para aduma be'edro. As a reward, God gave him a para aduma. Nechnesu chachmei Yisrael etzlo, and chachmei Yisrael heard about this, and they wanted to go to him. Amar lahem yodea ani bachem. So we're going to continue within the story in just a minute. But why is that a reward? Meaning, basically, in the end, we're going to see the para aduma is worth more than the choshen, right? They want to pay him even more. And we're going to see what Amma ben Atina says in just a minute. But Chazal tell us that there were only 12 para adumot that were born throughout the generations. And actually the last one is saved for Atid Lavo. So we used 11. We're waiting for that 12th one, which many of you know is being raised right now in a farm in the Golan. But putting that all aside, again, notice 12, that here he basically has one para that's worth the 12, right? So that's number one. Number two, can anyone tell me why is a para aduma not only worth more, because there are 12 stones on the Choshen, and he didn't have all of them, he only had some of them. Yana Chachamim wanted some avanim le'ifod. Para aduma, there's only one. So obviously it's going to be worth more. So that's how Hashem is going to give him a sachar. But notice, why is a para aduma really greater than the avanim of the ifod? Both of them are used for the Mishkan. Can anyone tell me, how are they used differently though? How are the avanim used differently than the para aduma? The avanim are placed in golden brackets on the choshen, and that's really beautiful. And yes, that's a tremendous kavod. We said fame and fortune. The para aduma and is used to benefit so many others, right? To make hundreds and thousands of people tahor. So here, the greatest reward is not just the fame and the fortune, or the fortune and the fame. It's the fortune and the ability to help more, right? To literally pay it forward, to bring about greater tara, greater relationship with God in this world. So when they come to ask him to purchase the paraduma, amar lahem yodea ani bachem. Shimani mevakesh mekem kol mamon shebaolam atem notnem li. He knows what a price he has. He says, I know whatever price I give you, you're going to give me. Ela ein ani mevakesh mekem ela oto mamon shebesadati b'shvil kvod Abba. Notice, the reward is that Hashem gives him even greater opportunities for mitzvot. And what does he say then? He himself realizes the only reason he has the para aduma is because it's a reward for the respect for not waking his father up, for the purchasing of the stones. And therefore he says, I just want the value, even though if anyone had the para aduma, it'd be worth more than the avanim. He says, I just want the value of the money that I lost last time for the stones. Bishvil kvod Abba. Notice what he says. He says, just give me what I lost for the respect of my father. And what is he basically saying? That's all I need, because the respect of my father was enough. That's enough of a reward. Now we understand ad hechan kibud avayim, different ways of understanding it. How far do you have to go for kibud avayim? That's how we originally understood it. How far? So far that you would lose $600,000, in a business meeting. Then we saw ad hechan. To what extent, but also ad hechan. How far reaching is it? How long does it continue for? We see ad hechan sachar kibud avayim. It's not just ad hechan mitzvat kibud avayim, ad hechan sachar kibud avayim. Just like in the Noach story, we hear that the next generation and many generations later are going to be punished. Oh, don't worry. Ad hechan kibud avayim, the sachar for kibud avayim basically never ends. And that's the paraduma. He's going to keep getting sachar for this. It's something that's perpetuated. Amar Rabbi Chanina, and now perhaps comes the most important statement. And if someone who wasn't commanded by Torah law does this, and someone who's commanded by Torah law, all the more so. All the more so what? Back to the beginning. Ad hechan. All the more so he's commanded in the commandments of kibud avayim. Or all the more so he'll be rewarded. by performing kibbud avayim. Because we know the famous rule on Chazal, Gadol mitzuveh v'oseh mimi she'ino mitzuveh v'oseh. That someone who's commanded has a greater reward than someone who's not commanded. So here we see literally a beautiful, beautiful expression of kibbud avayim. Here we're able to appreciate and the message of kibbud avayim through, as we see very nicely, and through the stories of Noah, the opposite. And here is where we basically learn, like Rabbi Hanina says, Mi she'no mitzuvah v'oseh kach, that we learn really that why do we need a Dama ben Netina story, not just to contrast with Mi she'mitzuvah v'oseh, in order to teach you that there really is a basic value. And if there's a basic value, there's going to be a great reward. And just like if there's a basic value, there's going to be a terrible punishment if one does not abide by basic kibbud avayim, expressed particularly when your father is sleeping. One could justify, my father's sleeping, of course he would want to get up. But we see really from the Noah story that respect means respecting, particularly when our parents are in vulnerable positions. And not to take advantage, but on the contrary, and to show even greater respect. So on that note, I think a very strong message that we see in the Torah, and through a very almost amorphous story, and sure enough, through the story of Dama ben Netina, through the times of Chazal. So on that note, wishing everyone a Shavua Tov and looking forward to continuing our Tanakh and Talmud stories next week.
תודה רבה, שבוע טוב.
שבוע טוב, חורף בריא.
אמן, אמן. תודה.